They say that the hardest part of a betrayal isn't the moment you find out. It's the silence that follows. It's that terrifying, ringing stillness in your ears when your entire world has just been pulled out from under you and you realize you're standing on nothing but thin air. My name is Elena. And until 3 o'clock this morning, I thought I was a happily married woman. I was lying in our king-sized bed staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet. Too quiet. James, my husband of 12 years, was supposedly in Chicago for a high-stakes legal conference. He was the star of his firm, a man whose name was whispered in the hallways of power. I had spent a decade building him up, being the silent engine behind his massive success. The storm outside was rattling the window panes, a cold, relentless rain that matched the strange, hollow feeling in my chest. And then, it happened. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. I figured it was a news alert or a junk email, but when I reached for it, the screen showed an unknown number. Usually I'd ignore it, but something about the way it buzzed, 3 times, stopped, then started again, felt desperate. I swiped the screen. "Hello?" I whispered. My voice felt like it didn't belong to me. For a long moment, there was nothing but static. And then, a sob. A deep, jagged, terrified sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Eleanor!" The voice on the other end gasped. It was a woman. She sounded young, and she sounded like she was running for her life. "Who is this?" I asked, sitting up. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "How do you have this number?" I'm Maya," she choked out. "I know you don't know me. I'm the girl from the office, the one James has been seeing." The air left the room. I felt like I had been punched in the solar plexus. The woman my husband was cheating on me with was calling me. In the middle of the night. Sobbing. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my voice turning to ice. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. "Please," she sobbed, and I heard a metallic bang in the background like a door being hit. "Please don't hang up. He told me he was leaving you. He told me you were the monster. But Elena, he's not in Chicago. He's here, and he won't let me leave. He's taking everything. He's going to destroy me, and I have no one else to call." "Where are you?" I asked, a strange cold clarity settling over me. "The apartment on 5th, she whispered. "The one he bought with your inheritance. Elena, please, help me." And then the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the phone still pressed to my ear. My husband was a liar. He was a cheater. He had stolen my money to buy a nest for another woman. But as I heard that dial tone, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. James thought he had won. He thought he had played us both. He didn't realize that the 2 women he had been lying to were about to become his worst nightmare. This is the story of how my husband's greatest betrayal became the foundation of my greatest victory. To understand why James felt he could get away with this, you have to understand who we were, or rather, who I made him. When I met James, he was a brilliant but broke law student with a chip on his shoulder the size of the Chrysler Building. I was the daughter of a real estate mogul, quiet, studious, and unfortunately, very trusting. I saw the fire in him. I saw the way he looked at the world, like it was a puzzle he was determined to solve. I fell in love with his ambition. I didn't realize back then that ambition is often just a polite word for greed. When my father passed away, he left me a substantial inheritance. Not just money, but properties, stocks, and a reputation that opened every door in the city. I poured all of it into James. I paid for his bar exams, I funded his first small practice, and I used my family's connections to ensure he was the first choice for every major developer in town. "I'll pay you back, Eleanor," he used to whisper in our early years, his arms wrapped around me in our first tiny apartment. "Every cent. I'm going to build us an empire. You'll be the queen of this city. I didn't want to be a queen. I just wanted to be a partner. But as the years went by, the empire became more important than the partnership. James became a titan. He moved from small-time real estate law to high-level corporate litigation. He was charming, he was ruthless, and he was always working. I started to notice the changes slowly. It's never one big thing, it's 1,000 tiny needles. It's the way he stopped looking me in the eye when we toasted to his promotions. It's the way he started locking his phone and taking private calls in the garden, even when it was freezing outside. "It's a confidential case, Elle," he'd say with that practiced, condescending smile. "You wouldn't understand the legal complexities. Just focus on the charity gala. You look so much better when you're not worrying your pretty head about the firm." I let him talk to me like that. I let him diminish me because I thought I was protecting our legacy. I thought that if I was the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect support system, he would eventually come back to me. I spent my days organising fundraisers and my nights waiting for a man who was becoming a ghost. I was the one who made sure his suits were pressed. I was the one who remembered his mother's birthday. I was the one who handled the taxes and the property management for the buildings I had inherited. Or so I thought. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The missing statements, the new investments he asked me to sign off on without reading the fine print. I was so blinded by my loyalty that I didn't see I was signing my own eviction notice. James wasn't just building an empire for us. He was building a fortress for himself. And he was using my bricks and my mortar to do it. By our 10th anniversary, we were living in a penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home. We had everything money could buy. And yet, I had never felt more alone. James was a stranger who lived in my house. He was a man who thrived on the worship of the public. But in the dark, when the cameras were off, he was cold. He was hollow. And then came Maya. I didn't know her name then. I just knew there was a new energy in his life. A new secretary who seemed to be on every conference call. A new reason for him to stay late. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that a man like James, a man who prided himself on his integrity, would never throw away a 12-year marriage for a girl in her 20s. How wrong I was. James didn't see our marriage as a bond. He saw it as a contract, and he had decided that the terms were no longer in his favour. The months leading up to that 3 a.m. phone call were a masterclass in gaslighting. James started to become concerned about my mental health. It started small. He'd forget to tell me about dinner plans and then act shocked when I wasn't ready. "Elena, I told you about this 3 days ago," he'd sigh, looking at his watch with a look of practiced pity. "Are you sure you're feeling okay? Maybe you're just overwhelmed with the house. You seem so forgetful lately." I started to doubt my own mind. I started writing everything down in a notebook, hidden in my nightstand. But even then, he'd find ways to shake my confidence. He wanted me to feel small. He wanted me to feel like I needed him to manage my affairs. And then I found the first piece of evidence. It wasn't a lipstick stain or a suggestive text. It was a receipt for a Cartier watch, $50,000. I found it tucked into the pocket of one of his suits while I was getting it ready for the dry cleaners. My heart stopped. Our anniversary was months away. My birthday had passed. I didn't confront him immediately. I had learned from my father that in business and in war, you never show your hand until you have the winning cards. I began to dig. While James was at the gym, I was in his home office bypassing the passwords I had helped him set up years ago. What I found wasn't just an affair. It was a heist. James had been funneling money out of my inheritance accounts for 3 years. He had created shell companies, names like Blue Horizon and Apex Holdings, and was moving assets into them. These were companies I had no legal claim to. He was essentially stealing my father's legacy piece by piece and moving it into a private world I wasn't allowed to see. And then there were the photos. I found a hidden folder on his cloud drive. It wasn't just some girl. It was a life. James and a young woman, Maya, smiling in front of a beautiful apartment on Fifth Avenue. An apartment I had never seen. An apartment bought with a Blue Horizon wire transfer. In the photos, James looked happy. He looked like the man I fell in love with 20 years ago. He was laughing, holding her hand, looking at her with a warmth he hadn't shown me in a decade. The betrayal felt like a physical weight in my chest, making it hard to breathe. He wasn't just having a fling, he was building a replacement life. He was waiting for the right moment to discard me, taking my money with him, and moving into the Fifth Avenue sun with his new, younger version of me. I sat in his leather chair, the glow of the computer screen reflecting in my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I felt a cold, hard rage. Not the kind of rage that makes you scream, the kind of rage that makes you silent. I didn't cry. I didn't pack my bags. I went back to the bedroom, put the receipt back in his pocket, and lay down next to him when he came home. I let him kiss my cheek. I let him tell me about his boring day at the firm. I was waiting. I knew that a man like James always gets sloppy when he thinks he's too smart to be caught. I just didn't expect that the help I needed to destroy him would come from the very woman he was using to replace me. When the phone rang at 3 a.m. and Maya's voice broke through the silence, I realized that James hadn't just betrayed me, he had betrayed her too. He was a predator who didn't know how to stop. And that was his biggest mistake, because a man can survive one angry woman, but he will never survive two women who have nothing left to lose. The drive to Fifth Avenue was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the city lights into smears of neon red and cold blue. My hands were gripped so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles were ghost white. Mark Dow. Every time I wiped the fog from the windshield, I saw James's face. I saw the way he'd smiled at me over dinner just 2 nights ago. I saw the way he'd kissed me goodbye, promising to call as soon as he landed in Chicago. The lie was so thick, it felt like I was breathing underwater. I pulled up to the building. It was one of those old money pre-war buildings. Doorman, marble lobby, the kind of place where privacy is bought with 6-figure association fees. My inheritance money. My father's sweat and blood. The doorman didn't even look at me twice when I gave him the apartment number. He probably thought I was another high-end visitor or a late-night assistant. The elevator ride up to the 12th floor felt like a descent into a nightmare. My heart was thumping so loud in the small space I was sure the security cameras could hear it. Thump, thump, thump. When the doors slid open, the hallway was silent. It smelled of expensive lilies and floor wax. I walked to apartment 12B. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The apartment was beautiful. It was decorated exactly how I like. Minimalist, elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the park. It was a mirror of my own home, a second version of my life, built on a foundation of theft. And there, sitting on a designer velvet sofa, was Maya. She looked younger than she did in the photos, smaller. She was huddled in a silk robe, her face smudged with mascara, her hands shaking so hard she had to grip a glass of water with both of them. She looked up when I walked in. For a second there was pure terror in her eyes. She probably expected me to scream. She probably expected me to lung at her, to call her every name in the book. But I didn't. I just stood there dripping wet, looking at the woman who had replaced me. "You came," she whispered. Her voice was thin, like a frayed wire. "Where is he?" I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from a mile away. "He left," she said, a fresh sob breaking through. "He got a call. Something about a witness in the Marshall case. He got angry because I asked him why he hadn't filed the divorce papers for you yet. He told me I was just a project he was tired of working on. He took my keys. He took my passport. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. He told me if I told anyone about Blue Horizon, he'd make sure I was the one who went to prison for the embezzlement. He's a monster, Eleanor. He's been using me to sign documents for the shell companies. He told me it was just for tax purposes. I didn't know. I didn't know he was stealing it from you. I walked over and sat in the chair across from her. I didn't feel anger toward her. Not anymore. The anger was a cold, hard stone in my stomach, and it was all reserved for James. Show me, I said. Show me everything he made you sign. Maya stood up, her legs trembling, and walked to a small safe hidden behind a painting. She punched in a code, James's birthday, of course, and pulled out a thick leather binder. I kept copies, she whispered. I'm a paralegal. I know how men like him work. I kept them for protection, but I was too scared to use them. Until tonight. As I opened that binder, the true scale of James's betrayal finally came into focus. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a few $1,000s. My husband wasn't just a cheater. He was a criminal. I spent the next 3 hours in that apartment, sitting side by side with the woman James had used to replace me. It was surreal. 2 women connected by the same man's lies, huddled over a ledger of his crimes. If James could have seen us then, he would have realized his empire was already starting to burn. The documents were damning. James hadn't just been funneling money. He was involved in a massive insider trading scheme. He was using my family's real estate holdings as collateral for high-risk loans, then laundering the profits through Maya's Blue Horizon company. But the part that made the blood drain from my face? My signature was on every single loan application. He had forged my name hundreds of times. Or worse, he had slipped those pages into the boring charity paperwork he always made me sign while I was busy or distracted. He had effectively made me the fall guy. If the SEC or the FBI ever came knocking, the paper trail led straight to me. James would be the innocent husband who had no idea his wife was a corporate thief. He'd walk away with the Fifth Avenue apartment, the shell company millions, and his reputation intact. He's planning to leave next week, Maya whispered, pointing to a set of flight confirmations tucked into the back of the binder. One-way tickets to Zurich. Not for us. Just for him. I looked at the dates. He was leaving on our anniversary. He was going to finalize the biggest real estate merger of the decade on Friday, a deal that would trigger a $20 million payout. And then he was going to vanish, leaving me with the debt, the fraud charges, and a broken heart. He thinks he's so smart, I said. The coldness in my heart was spreading, turning into a sharp, focused power. Maya looked at me, her face pale. What are we going to do? He'll destroy me if I go to the police. He has friends everywhere. Judges, commissioners. The police won't help us, I said, closing the binder. James knows how to beat the law. He's been doing it for years. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The rain had stopped. The city was glowing, indifferent to the lives being shattered in its high-rises. If we want to stop him, I said, we have to beat him at his own game. He thinks he's the only one who knows how to move money. He thinks he's the only one who can disappear. I turned back to Maya. You have the logins for the Blue Horizon accounts, don't you? She nodded slowly. And you have the access codes to his private server at the firm? I do. I have the backup keys on an encrypted drive. I sat back down and leaned in. James spent 12 years making me feel like I wasn't smart enough to understand his world. He spent 3 years making you feel like you were too small to escape it. I reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cold, but her grip was tight. Tonight that ends, I said. He wants to celebrate a merger on Friday? Fine. We're going to give him a celebration he'll never forget. We're going to let him think he's won. We're going to let him stand in that boardroom and sign those papers. And then we're going to pull the ground out from under him. Maya's eyes searched mine. You'd really help me? Even after everything? James is the enemy, Maya, I said. You were just the weapon he used to hurt me, but weapons can change hands. A slow, dark smile touched Maya's lips for the first time. Where do we start? The next 3 days were a blur of cold, calculated precision. I returned to the penthouse before sunrise. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I sat at my vanity, putting on my perfect wife mask. I did my hair, I put on my pearls, and I waited for James to walk through the door. When he finally arrived at 7 a.m., he looked exhausted. He gave me a weary smile and kissed my forehead. The Marshall case is finally settling, Elle, he said, throwing his briefcase on the sofa. I'm sorry I couldn't call. It was a war room situation. I understand, honey, I said, handing him a cup of coffee. I'm just glad you're home. Are we still on for the anniversary dinner on Friday? Of course, he said, taking a sip. He didn't even notice that my hand wasn't shaking. He didn't notice the icy glint in my eyes. He was too arrogant to see anything but his own reflection. It's going to be a big night. The merger finalizes at noon. And then, a fresh start for us. A fresh start. My skin crawled at the lie. As soon as he left for the office, the real work began. I wasn't the forgetful wife anymore. I was the daughter of my father. I spent 8 hours a day in a secure office I'd rented under a fake name, working with Maya via encrypted messages. We didn't just want to stop the money. We wanted to take it. Step 1 was the ghost transfer. Maya used her access to the Blue Horizon accounts to set up a secondary mirror account. Every dollar James thought he was moving to Zurich was actually being rerouted into a secure trust fund in my name, a trust fund he couldn't touch, and more importantly, one he didn't even know existed. Step over was the paper trail. We spent hours scanning and uploading every forged signature, every illegal wire transfer, and every recorded conversation Maya had secretly taped over the last year. We weren't sending it to the police, not yet. We were sending it to the one person James feared more than the law, Mr. Sterling, the senior partner of his firm. Mr. Sterling was an old-school man of integrity. He treated James like a son, but if he found out James was laundering money through the firm and stealing from his own wife, he wouldn't just fire James, he would bury him. But the masterstroke was the anniversary gift. James had bought me a beautiful diamond-encrusted necklace for our celebration. He'd shown it to me weeks ago, acting as though it were a token of his undying love. I decided I was going to return the favor. I visited a private detective, one who specialized in high-stakes corporate sabotage. I gave him a specific list of names, the board members of the company James was merging with. I want them to receive a package, I told him, on Friday, at exactly 12:15 p.m., just as the champagne is being poured. What's in the package, Mrs. Vance? He asked. The truth, I said, and a very expensive invoice. By Thursday night, the trap was set. James was upstairs, whistling in the shower, probably dreaming of his life in Switzerland. I sat in the living room, watching the rain start again. I looked at my wedding ring. It was a beautiful, heavy gold band. It felt like a shackle. I took it off and set it on the coffee table. Certo, tomorrow James would stand at the peak of his mountain. He would think he had successfully stolen my past and destroyed my future. He didn't realize that I was the one who had written the ending to his story. I picked up my phone and sent a final message to Maya. Are you ready? The reply came back instantly. I've never been more ready. Friday was coming, and James had no idea that the monster he'd been hiding from his mistress wasn't me. It was the woman he was coming home to every night. Friday at noon. The air in the boardroom on the 40th floor was thin and smelled of expensive coffee and leather. This was James's cathedral. This was where he felt like a god. I wasn't in the room. I was sitting in a car 3 blocks away, a laptop open on my knees, watching the feed from the hidden camera Maya had planted in the corner of their room 2 days ago. James was at the head of the table. He looked radiant. He was wearing his favourite charcoal suit, the one I'd picked out for him, and he was laughing with the board members of the merging company. He looked like the picture of success. He looked like a man who didn't have a care in the world. "Gentlemen," James said, his voice smooth and commanding, "this merger represents a new era for all of us. The Apex Sterling partnership will be the dominant force in the market. Let's make it official." He picked up the gold-plated pen. I watched through the screen as he scrawled his name on the final page of the merger agreement. In that moment, he triggered the $20 million payout. I saw his phone buzz on the table. He glanced at it, a smirk playing on his lips. He probably thought it was the notification from his bank in Zurich, confirming the arrival of the first wire transfer. But he didn't know that the notification was actually an alert from the ghost transfer script Maya and I had written. James excused himself to the restroom, his walk slightly more arrogant than usual. I followed him via his phone's GPS. He didn't go to the restroom. He ducked into a quiet stairwell and dialed a number. I patched into the call. "It's done," James hissed into the phone. He wasn't calling me. He wasn't calling Maya. He was calling his private broker. "The funds should be hitting the account now. I want the conversion to Swiss francs immediate. I'm leaving for the airport in 4 hours. Is the jet ready?" "James," I said, cutting into the line. There was a dead silence on the other end. I could practically hear his heart stop. "Eleanor," he stammered. Why are you on this line? I'm in a high-level meeting. "You're in a stairwell, James," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "And the money isn't in Zurich. It's in a trust fund under my maiden name, every single dollar." "What are you talking about?" he snarled, his voice dropping into that dangerous low tone he used when he was losing control. "You've lost your mind. I'm coming home to get you some help." "Don't bother coming home, James," I said. "Look behind you." The stairwell door creaked open. Mr. Sterling, the senior partner, was standing there. He wasn't smiling. He was holding a thick leather binder, the one Maya had given me. "James," Mr. Sterling said, his voice vibrating with a cold, disappointed rage, "we need to talk about Blue Horizon, and we need to talk about why you've been laundering firm money through your wife's inheritance." James dropped his phone. It clattered on the concrete steps, the screen shattering. The god of the 40th floor had just fallen to earth. I was waiting for him at the penthouse when he arrived 2 hours later. He didn't come in with a briefcase. He came in with a look of pure, unadulterated panic. His tie was undone, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. "Where is it?" he screamed, lunging towards me. "The money, Elena! Where did you move it? That's my money. I earned that." I stood by the window, a glass of wine in my hand. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. "Your money?" I asked, tilting my head. "The money you stole from my father. The money you forged my name to get. The money you were going to use to leave me for a girl half your age." He stopped, his face turning a deep, mottled red. You think you've won? I'll have you arrested for theft. I'll tell them you've been unstable for years. I'll take everything." "You already took everything, James," I said, and then I took it back. I reached onto the coffee table and picked up a small silver gift box. "Happy anniversary, James. I got you a little something." I threw the box at his feet. He stared at it for a second, then ripped it open. Inside wasn't a watch, it wasn't a key. It was a stack of legal documents. A temporary restraining order, an emergency injunction freezing every one of his personal accounts, and a summons for a grand jury investigation into corporate fraud and money laundering. "Mr. Sterling didn't just fire you, James," I said. He turned over the binder to the district attorney. "They've been at the firm for the last hour. seizing your hard drives. They found the Zurich tickets, by the way. They also found the photos of you and Maya at the Fifth Avenue apartment. James collapsed onto the sofa, the expensive Italian leather sofa I had bought with my first dividend check. He looked small. He looked pathetic. "Maya," he whispered. "She told you, that little—" "I gave her everything. I bought her that apartment." "You didn't buy her anything, James," a voice said from the hallway. Maya walked in. She wasn't wearing the silk robe anymore. She was wearing a sharp, professional suit. She looked like the woman she was before James had spent 3 years trying to break her. "You used me," Maya said, her voice steady and strong. "You made me an accomplice. You told me you loved me while you were planning to leave me to take the fall for your crimes. You called Eleanor a monster, but the only monster in this room is you." James looked from me to Maya, the realization finally sinking in. The two women he had played against each other were standing together. He had built his world on the assumption that we were weak. He had built his success on the assumption that we were too blinded by his brilliance to see his rot. He was wrong. The fallout was spectacular. Because James had used the firm's resources for his crimes, the merger was immediately voided. The $20 million payout he had dreamed of vanished like smoke in the wind. By the following Monday, James was no longer James the Titan. He was James the Defendant. The firm filed a massive civil suit against him to recover the laundered funds. I filed for divorce, and because of the evidence of his fraud and forged signatures, the judge granted me a summary judgment. I kept the penthouse. I kept the Fifth Avenue apartment. I kept every cent of my inheritance. James was left with nothing but a mountain of legal debt and a reputation so toxic that even his friends on the city commission wouldn't take his calls. Last I heard, he was living in a dingy one-bedroom rental on the edge of the city, waiting for his trial to begin. He's no longer wearing charcoal suits. He's wearing the weight of his own greed. Maya didn't go to prison. Because she had come to me, and because she had provided the evidence that brought him down, the district attorney granted her immunity. I gave her a portion of the funds from the Blue Horizon account, enough for her to move to another state, change her name, and finish her law degree. The last time I saw her, she was standing at the airport, looking at the departures board. "Thank you, Eleanor," she said, her eyes bright and clear. "Thank you for calling," I replied. We didn't hug. We weren't friends. We were survivors of the same storm. As for me, I stayed in the city, but I didn't stay in the museum. I sold the penthouse. I sold the properties James had tainted with his lies. I took my father's name and I started something new. A foundation for women who have been financially abused by the men they trusted. I learned that the hardest part of betrayal isn't the discovery. It's the realization of your own strength. James thought he had built a fortress. He didn't realize that I was the one holding the blueprints the whole time. I'm sitting on the deck of my new house now, a small, quiet place by the ocean. The air is salty and clean, and the only sound is the rhythmic washing of the waves against the shore. I look back at the 12 years I spent with James, and I don't feel anger anymore. I feel a strange kind of gratitude. He taught me that silence isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of preparation. James thought he was the architect of my life. He thought he could move me around like furniture, replacing me when I became old or boring. He forgot that ambition without integrity is just a slow-motion